everyone! So today I'm going to do a palette collection video. Now this is going up a little later than I intended because it took me longer than I intended to film this because I did actually film swatches of all of the palettes that I'm going to talk about, just to give you a little bit of an idea of like the overall color scheme, remove from the palette or the palette background or whatever, and just to see how it kind of looks on the skin. Obviously I'm quite pale, so you know I have like one extreme of a skin tone, but just to give you an idea. Keeping that in mind, I will say that I didn't like, it wasn't like a one swatch, one swipe type of like swatching endeavor. I did build the colors up just so you could see, you know, the actual colors. But if there are any like inconsistencies in formula or patchiness or whatever, I will be sure to mention that when I talk about the palettes. I'm going to try to keep this as succinct and concise as possible. If there's any like specific palette that you want me to talk about more in depth, I would be glad to do so, but this is just kind of to give you an idea of what I have in my collection right now. Okay, so I'm going to kind of do this by brand and then like in descending order of how many palettes I have with each brand. So definitely the most palettes I have from one brand are from Juvias Place. So I'm just going to start talking about those. So the first palette from Juvias Place that I have is the original, the Nubian palette. I really love this. I think it's a really beautiful neutral palette. Obviously very warm toned, very orangey and toasty, but I really love this. I love Juvias Place palettes. I've talked about them before. The next Juvias Place palette I have is the Saharan palette. I absolutely love this palette. It's really fun. You have some neutral shades, but also like some more pops of bright. Whatever. But again, really beautiful, bright, creamy metallics and blendable mattes, and I really love this palette as well. I love all of my Juvias Place palette. The next palette I have from Juvias Place is the Douce palette. This is really beautiful as well, a little bit lighter in tone. You do have a deeper shade to deepen looks up. I absolutely love this palette. I love pinks and purples. It's really beautiful. Really good for spring as well, so it's kind of a good time to talk about that palette. The next palette I have is the Tribe palette by Juvias Place. If you like green eyeshadow, this is a beautiful option. It's so nice. You have some really pretty duochromes. You have some, this is really reflective, but you have some brighter greens, a deeper metallic green. You can also do some orangey looks and more neutral looks. This is really versatile, and I really love this. This is one of my favorite Juvias Place palettes for sure. Then I have the Warrior 2 palette by Juvias Place. This is a really solid all matte palette. I find that I pull for this palette a lot if I just need like a black or a white or a more neutral transition tone or a deeper brown. Like, it's a palette that I pull for a lot to use in conjunction with other palettes, and I really, again, enjoy that. How many times did I possibly say that? Then I have the Festival palette by Juvias Place. This is definitely a brighter palette. You have a really bright red, really bright pink, more of like an almost neon-y coral. I really love this palette to create like really vibrant looks. I do find that some of the brighter shades do stain a little bit, but I think it's a really solid palette if you wanted to play with some brighter, kind of more red and pinky tones. Then I have the Zulu palette. This is one of the few like rainbow-y palettes that I own. But I love the tones of these in here, and I actually find it, I find it quite versatile and quite actually wearable when I pair it with other more neutral palettes. Not that I don't like color, but I find that this isn't a palette that I often use by itself. But I do enjoy having this to use in conjunction with other palettes in case I want to do an orange look or a pink look or a turquoisey bluey green look. Like I know that I have these shades in this palette. Then I have the Magic Mini palette. This is, again, a really beautiful palette. I love some of the duochromes in here. This Faso shade is absolutely stunning. Again, I often use this palette in conjunction with other palettes, but you can create really, really fun, beautiful, unique looks using just this palette as well. Again, like really great quality. It's more like what are you looking for color wise with Juvia's Place rather than like quality wise. I find them all to be pretty consistent. Then I have the Masquerade Mini as well. Again, really beautiful jewel toned metallics as well as some really warm toasty browns. I have gotten a ton of use out of this palette and I'm really quite love that as well. Then finally from Juvia's Place, I have the Nubian 2 palette. I've talked about this in my top 5 favorite palettes video. I absolutely love this. It's probably my favorite Juvia's Place palette that I own. It's really beautiful. Okay, so now moving on to my Colourpop palette. So I have 4 of their monochromatic, like 9-pan palettes. I have the It's My Pleasure palette. This is their 9-pan monochromatic purple palette. This is my favorite of the monochromatic palettes. I think this is absolutely stunning. It has a really good range of depths and really beautiful like metallic duochrome shades. Absolutely gorgeous. Then I have the Ooh La La palette from Colourpop. This is obviously their monochromatic pink palette. I really love this as well. I do wish that maybe they had some deeper shades. I also have the Honey palette. Obviously, this is their yellow palette. I do enjoy this. I find, again, I want a little bit more depth, and I also hate that it has a pressed glitter in it. But if you're looking for yellow tones, I do enjoy this. It's not perfect like the purple palette is, but it's a solid palette again. And then I have the Main Squeeze palette, which is their monochromatic red palette. I've had a ton of fun creating looks with this palette. It's obviously very red, but I love red eyeshadow. If you are looking for a palette with red eyeshadow, I think this is a really good, affordable place to start. I really love that as well. Then I have 4 of their, I want to say like medium-sized palettes, the ones with, I don't know how many, 12 shades? Anyway. So the first palette, I talked about this in my top 5 favorite palettes video. This is their Yes Please palette. I think this is, again, I mean, you can hear my thoughts on this palette in that video, but really beautiful. Mine is very dirty and disgusting looking, but I've loved it a lot, and I think this is a really beautiful, like warm, quote-unquote neutral, you know, reddy, pinky, orangey palette. Then I have the Colourpop and Kathleen Lights, the Zodiac palette. The packaging on this palette is so beautiful. And then this is what it looks like on the inside. I love Kathleen, obviously, as I bought this palette, but I find that some of the metallics in this palette aren't quite the same as the normal Colourpop formula. I do struggle sometimes to use the Aries and the Leo. I find they're pressed a little bit harder. They're not quite as metallic and foiled, which is a bit disappointing considering I was probably most excited about those shades, if I'm being honest, but I do think this is a solid palette, although I think it is getting discontinued if I'm not mistaken. Then I have the Dream Street palette with Kathleen Lights as well. This palette I find to be pretty consistent with Colourpop's normal quality. I really love all the shades in here. Obviously this is a very neutral palette with pops of like bluey teal, which is not the most unique ever, but I do really like this palette, and I do still get a lot of use out of it as well. And then I have, again, I talked about this in my top 5 favorite palettes video. This is the Colourpop Good Sport palette. In my opinion, this is probably Colourpop's best palette. I absolutely love this. Again, there's really no inconsistencies with the formula on this either, and I love the color scheme. Again, you can hear me talk about that more in my top 5 favorite palettes video. We're moving on to ABH. So I have the Modern Renaissance palette from ABH. I don't think you need to hear me say my thoughts on this. I really, really enjoy this, and it's a classic and I love it. Then I have the Soft Glam palette. This is probably my go-to neutral palette if I'm being honest. Anytime I have to like do anything for professional, anytime I have to do anything like semi-professional for work or anything like that, I pretty much just run to this palette. It's really, really beautiful. I love the tones. I don't find an issue with any inconsistencies in terms of the formula. It's really, really, really good, but I'm sure everyone watching this already knows that. And then I have the Subculture palette. I actually think I bought this on sale maybe a couple years. I actually don't hate this palette. I know that's like quite a hot take, but I don't think it's, okay, I don't want to get into it really at all, but I don't think it's as bad as everyone makes it out to be. And the color story, I think it's definitely difficult and you have to like think about it, and it takes like some time and effort to make your look all right, but I do actually, I don't mind it. And the color story for this palette is like perfection. It's so beautiful. When I was swatching it out, I was like, oh my god, if the formula was better, this would be like the be-all end-all of palettes for me. I don't get a ton of use out of it, but I do enjoy it. I don't detest it. Then I have the Jackie Aina and ABH palette. Again, I talked about this in my recent favorite palettes video that I did, so I don't need to talk more about it. I think just looking at it, you can see why I love it, and it's beautiful. Quality is amazing. If you haven't picked this up yet, I would strongly encourage everyone watching to do so. Then I have the Riviera palette. This was kind of an impulse purchase that I made, if I'm being honest. However, I do really, really love this. You absolutely cannot see that. It's very reflected. I think this is a really fun palette. I really love the metallics in it. I love the tones of the mattes. I don't know. Do I think you need this? No. Do I think it's a really like fun palette? Yes. And I also love the packaging. It's definitely not an essential, but I'm glad that I do have it in my collection. Okay, now for the controversial segment of this video. I do have a few Morphe palettes. So let's just start off. I've talked about this. Everyone knows that I already have this. It's the original Morphe and Jaclyn Hill palette. I've talked about this, so I don't think I need to go in depth, but I do have that in my collection. I also have, I did a video on this, first impressions. This is the Jaclyn Hill Volume 2 palette. Having played with this more, I actually do quite like this. Yeah, I think this is actually a really fun palette. I have many a thought on it, but the short story is that I have enjoyed playing with this, and I think it's pretty good quality and fun colors, and I don't think it's a bad palette at all. It's kind of up to your discretion based on how you feel about Morphe and Jaclyn Hill. So there you go. I also have the Jaclyn Hill Vault collection, which is its own story entirely, but I'm just gonna quickly show you these just because why the fuck not? We're here anyway, aren't we? This is the Armed and Gorgeous palette. This is my personal favorite. I actually don't think this is bad really at all, except for this classified shade has major hard pan after using only a handful of times, and it's my pet peeve when metallic eyeshadows do that. I don't know why they do that, but yeah, it did that, so that's kind of a disappointment for me. Then we have the Ring the Alarm palette. This is, again, a fine palette. I think it's pretty consistent. Like, there's not really like a bad shade necessarily in this palette. I think it's fine, it's good. Then I have the Bling Boss palette. This is the one that I find has the most inconsistencies in terms of formula, and I think you can probably see that from the swatches. The deeper shades are a little bit patchy, which is kind of disappointing. You can make them work for sure, It's not like, oh, these are like horrible, shitty eyeshadows. It's just, they are like just the tiniest bit patchy that you do kind of have to manipulate them a little bit more to make them work. And then there is the, what is this even called? Dark Magic palette. I don't hate this either. You have to work a bit to blend out the greens, but I don't think it's not the best colorful palette I've ever used, but it's definitely not the worst either. I do think, I think it is worth mentioning, like, no one actually gives a shit what I think about this random old Jaclyn Hill collection, but I do think that these, like, the colors and the, like, color stories of all of these palettes are, like, well thought out and quite unique and really pretty, I think. So, like, regardless of anything else, that's what drew me to them and what made me want to buy them, is I think they're, like, quite pretty to look at, and I think the color story is, like, well thought out. Barring, like, the formula or anything. So, and I don't think those are bad. Like, I still think if you bought them, you wouldn't be disappointed, but that's actually not the point of this video at all. And then finally, I have the Morphe James Charles palette, and I laugh because I don't actually watch James Charles, and this was actually a really impulse buy. I think there must have been a sale or something, and so I bought it. And you know what? I actually don't hate it. I kind of hate to say that, but I actually don't hate it. It's actually what I'm wearing on my eyes today in my crease. I have the matte blues. But you know what? If you're looking for like a colorful palette, I think this is good, to be honest. I don't love the metallics, but I think it's like not bad for how much you get for the price. I don't think this is actually a bad palette. Again, it will really depend on your opinion of Morphe and or James Charles. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about, well, this is also kind of a contentious brand as well, but I have a lot of palettes by Makeup Revolution. Okay, again, the short and sweet version of my opinion of Makeup Revolution eyeshadows is that all of these palettes are definitely not created equal. I think they're a pretty decent quality for the price. Definitely not my favorite eyeshadow formula, but I do think if you're on a budget, these are a pretty good option, and you definitely can make them work easily. So, the first one is the Reloaded Neutrals 3 palette. I don't know. It's like deeper purples and like burgundy, goldy shades. I don't mind this. I think this is one of the better palettes that I have for Makeup Revolution. I actually really quite love the shimmers in this. I think they're quite pigmented and really creamy and easy to work with, and I think this is a pretty good palette from Makeup Revolution for sure. Then I have the Reloaded Neutrals 2 palette. Oops. I also like this palette. I think it lacks a little bit of depth. But again, I really like the metallics in this. If you're looking for an affordable palette, this isn't bad by any means. Okay. Then I have the Reloaded Iconic Fever palette. Now this definitely gives me soft glam vibes. I don't think it's like supposed to be an exact dupe, but it's quite similar. I don't hate this. I think it's fine. Like, I'm not as enthusiastic about this palette as the other ones, but I don't think it's bad. This is the Reloaded Iconic Vitality palette. So this is obviously a direct dupe of Modern Renaissance. I this is not the video to get into my thoughts about copycat palettes, but here's the thing. If you want modern renaissance but you like really just can't afford to spend $50 or $60, however much it is, on an eyeshadow palette, which are you kidding me? I totally get. I don't think this is bad. Like, you can get similar colors and like it's not totally shit quality. Like, you probably wouldn't be disappointed with this if you're like if you really want modern renaissance but you can't afford it. I think, like, sure, get this. It's not horrible by any means. Then I have the Reloaded Visionary palette. So it's obviously more purple and pink palette. This is pretty like inconsistent within the palette itself. This purple shade is like a weird satin shimmery shade that's like too shimmery to be used in the crease, but like not really shimmery enough to like do much as like a shimmer shade. And these two shades, like this light gold and this purple here, I find to be quite dusty. However, the other metallics in this palette are really, really beautiful, and I don't really have a ton of issues with the mattes, but that's just my thoughts on that one. And then I have the Iconic Division, Reloaded Iconic Division palette, obviously a dupe for Subculture. Not really my favorite. Similar weirdly to the Subculture palette, I have issues with this shade and this shade. I find they get hard pan and they're not really that easy to use, and the greens are a tiny bit patchy and not super, super pigmented. So I don't know, take that how you will. And then I actually Makeup Revolution actually just came to the Pharmaprix nearest me, so I on a whim picked up the Roxasaurus Ride or Die palette for Makeup Revolution. I actually haven't used this yet. I've just swatched it, so I can't really give you like thoughts on how this performs, but you can see the swatches for yourself. I think the shades in here are quite pretty actually, but I haven't used it yet. Okay, so let's talk about Urban Decays. So I have all of the original Naked palettes. This is the original Naked palette, and I actually recently got this as a gift from my grandma. So this isn't like the original Naked palette. This is actually, funnily enough, new to me. But I know that I don't need to talk about this palette and my thoughts because you can't even buy this anymore. So, and then I have the Naked 2 palette. I know I'm not going to be able to show you this fully because they're like falling out of the palette, the shades, and then the white shade's broken, the black shade's broken. This is the Naked 2. I lived for this palette when I first got it. This was my very first eyeshadow palette ever. Memories. I'm like the 188th person who's like, I'm just keeping my Naked palettes for sentimental reasons, but here we are. And then I have the Naked 3 palette. Again, I loved this when I got this. I don't really use it anymore at all. But, you know, they bring back memories. They're fun to have. Then I have, randomly enough, the Gwen Stefani and Urban Decay palette. This you can't get anymore. This is really old. But I used to like love the shit out of this. I honestly don't really use it that much anymore. It's quite neutral, and I don't really love this like bottom row of more colorful shades. I don't really like them, but I liked it when I got it. Then I have the Urban Decay Born to Run palette. I forgot about this when I was doing my favorite palette video, but I really love this palette. I think they're beautiful. I love the quality of the shadows. You obviously have like every shade you could ever need. I bring this with me pretty much always when I travel, aka go on an occasional trip and then go home to visit my mom. But I really like this. I think this is easily the best palette that Urban Decay has come out with, and I've loved using this. I really enjoy that. And then I have Kaleidos 3 Kaleidos makeup palettes. I've talked about these before. I mean, first of all, packaging is stunning. I love these. This is the Futurism 1 Sci-Fi Green palette. Absolutely gorgeous. And this is the Futurism 2 Cyber Bronze palette. This is stunning. It's such a beautiful neutral palette. I love the red shade in that. And then I have the Futurism 3 Astro Pink palette. Easily the most beautiful packaging of the bunch, I think. And then it looks like this. So beautiful. Like, absolutely stunning quality. Like, competing with Juvias Place for my favorite formula of eyeshadow. If you haven't tried Kaleidos Makeup Out, I would strongly encourage you to do so. Then I have 2 Melt palettes. I have the Gemini palette. I've talked about this a ton. I really like this. I think it's quite good. And then I have the Melt Amor Eterno Muerte palette. I did a review on this, but please don't watch it because it's horrible. But I do really love this palette a lot, and I really want to get the Vita palette. Okay, and now on to like some more random palettes, some that are a lot that are older. So this is the Too Faced Chocolate Bar palette. Oops. Again, you all have seen this 1,001 times. You don't need me to talk about this, but I used this the other day actually, like randomly, just for shits and gigs, and it's not bad. I wouldn't like repurchase it, but I don't think it's bad by any means. And this is like old. That's like the original version of that palette. Then I have the Kat Von D Shade and Light Eye Palette. This was before I stopped purchasing from Kat Von D, and I yet have still to decide if I'm going to support the new Kat Von D vegan beauty. But I actually use this palette still a lot. I think it's quite good. And I like the packaging. It's like quite hefty. Then I have another contentious makeup brand, the Huda Beauty Desert Dusk palette. I will say, upon swatching this palette, it actually swatches horribly. Like, the swatches look really bad. But, so then I used it because I was like, does this palette actually suck? And then no, like it's a good palette. It's pigmented, it blends nicely. Like it's I think good eyeshadow, but it swatches badly. So I wouldn't, like, don't judge this palette based off of the swatches that you're gonna see. But no, I think this is good, and it's quite unique in terms of like, there's lots of textural differences. The like topper shades are a little bit more difficult to work with, but they're not impossible if you wet your brush or use your fingers. And I actually like got a ton of use out of this palette. I quite enjoy it. But I don't have anything else from Huda Beauty. This is it. Then I have the Tarte Tartist Pro palette, and I actually quite enjoy this. I think the metallics like on this side are really beautiful. They're really creamy and bright and nice to work with, and I actually quite like the mattes. And then I have 2 very random palettes. I have the Makeup Forever 9 Artist Shadow Palette, and I think this is, it says it's palette 3. Anyway, I don't know. It looks like this. I got this at Winners. I did not pay full price for this. I think I paid like maybe $20. Because I really wanted to try Makeup Forever shadows. I'd never used them. I don't hate this, but I don't really love it. And I don't know that I would encourage anyone to go buy this. And then, last but not least, I have the e.l.f. Summer Breeze eyeshadow palette, the Mad for Matte like 2 palette. And for a drugstore palette, I think this is pretty good, to be honest. I think I've done a video using this. I don't think it's bad. Alright everyone, so that concludes this palette collection video. It's definitely not the smallest collection, but I also think it's not the largest that I've ever seen by any means. Let me know your favorite eyeshadow palettes and if I should pick them up, because I love eyeshadow. and I love collecting it and using it and swatching it and looking at it. Yeah, so thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for new upcoming exciting content from yours truly, and I'll see you later. Bye.